And we are live, and the internet once again is shaky. I hope the audio quality is good. Welcome to everybody that finds me here. This is another impromptu live stream. I'm enjoying surprising everyone, so they're going to be impromptu until you guys send me enough requests telling me to forewarn you. Today, so welcome to anybody watching, and welcome to those who are watching on the replay. Today, I want to talk about overcoming your social anxiety. Obviously, most of us have been in a rut for at least significant periods of over the last year or so. And I think that there are some easy steps to getting out of this rut that we can pay attention to and work towards, and it will be beneficial for everyone. So, first of all, I want you to think about what you mean by your social anxiety. Like, it's easy for us to say, you know, I'm an anxious person. I'm socially anxious. I have social anxiety. I am this way. And sort of like we talked about yesterday, there comes a significant problem when we identify as a person who is such and such a way, specifically when that's a negative thing. Hello to our viewer. Please comment your name and say hello. There's a problem when we identify ourselves as an anxious person, because what we're doing in that case is that we're taking away our autonomy to change. If you say, I am an anxious person, or I am bad with technology, I am bad with women, and I want to be better, you are now identifying yourself as a fixed entity who has significant difficulties and will always have significant difficulties because that's your identity. So what instead you should be doing is saying that I feel the state of social anxiety right now. Now, what happens here is you leave it within your control to then change that. So what can you actually do to change it? What can you do if you're a person that's experiencing social anxiety right now? Well, first to think, what are some ways that you're not going to overcome your social anxiety? Well, the first way is that if you're someone that's spending a lot of time indoors, perhaps in the house, inside, this is not going to overcome your social anxiety. And actually watching this video isn't going to help you overcome your social anxiety. However, it might be the motivation, it might provide the motivation that you need to go outside the house and actually overcome that social anxiety. So it cannot happen when you are not in social situations. And the terrifying fear of putting yourself in social situations, approaching a random stranger in the day, going outside the house, seeing a woman that you're attracted to, walking up to her and introducing yourself, essentially opening that door, that first door of communication. That is how you overcome the anxiety that exists for that exact action, and thus you have to go before you're ready to go. Clearly, it doesn't suffice to overcome your anxiety and then approach. This is the great paradox or conundrum. People say, like, I want to overcome my social anxiety so that I can approach easily. No, you've got it the wrong way around. You need to approach so that you can overcome your social anxiety. Now, it's easy to say that, Sam, but when I go out and I see that girl, I'm too nervous to go and talk to her. By the way, guys, feel free to comment, post any questions, comment your name. Let's try and keep it on topic on social anxiety, but anything you want to comment, just let me know, say hi. So you need to leave the house and you need to say, right, well, what is the first step that I can take towards overcoming my social anxiety? And in this video, I'm going to give you some steps. I'm going to give you some steps to overcoming the social anxiety. Now, the first step starts before you leave the house. And what you have to do is you have to commit to the idea of interaction. You have to say, I will not return to this house without having spoken to someone. Right? Now, that speaking to someone can range from a full-blown front approach, or it could just be saying hi to someone outside of a shop or in a store, in a pharmacy. Each step leads to the next one, but you have to commit to the idea of interaction when you leave the house, because only once you've committed will you actually stick to your task. You have to commit your mind to it. Otherwise, you'll walk around and you won't even really be paying attention to people. You won't ever get those butterflies. You won't ever get that slight anxiety when you see someone and you know you need to talk to them, because you haven't committed to it. So the first thing is to commit to the notion that you are going to approach someone, you are going to talk to someone. Second thing to do is to do a social meditation. Now, I do this with all of my clients. Every client that comes on my courses, when we go out to do approaching, we always start with this social meditation. Guys, let me know how the audio is. I know there were some problems yesterday, so let me know if the audio is better and if the video quality is okay or good or bad, and maybe I can fix it up. So just comment in the comment section how the quality of the video is. So the social meditation goes like this. You slow down your walking, because what happens is there's a triangularity between the speed of your walking, the speed of your thinking, and the speed of your talking. It's like a trifecta. So if you slow down your walking, what you'll also find is that you will slow down your thinking. And when you slow down your thinking, you're going to slow down the speed at which you speak as well. And one of the biggest problems that guys have is that they say, you know, I run out of things to say. And this problem is purely a problem of anxiety. This isn't a problem that you're not interesting or that you have nothing to say. Because if you were not anxious, you would understand, again, that you do not need to say anything. It's not required that you're speaking all of the time. And when you slow yourself down, that first step to slow the speed of your walking down, because remember, it's always easier to change a physical action than to change a mindset, right? Just like it's easier to start, you have to start approaching to overcome your anxiety or to work through your anxiety. In the same way, to slow down the speed of the thoughts in your mind, you've got to slow down the speed of your walking, right? And what happens when you slow down is you start to see everything more clearly, right? You have more time to look around. It's easier to see the women that you're walking past. Thanks, guys, for the comments. I'm glad that the quality is better than last time. So you slow down your walking, which slows your mind down and leaves more space to pay attention to the individuals in your social environment. And then when you do find yourself in conversation, I mean, primarily in conversation with yourself, right? We have those internal monologues, but even in conversation with other people as well, what you'll find is that your conversations will slow down and you will fill the space of nothing to say with words that are more slow, more decided, more decisive. And that will be a more effective way of communicating. You will also give the girl with whom you're speaking to, or even the guy, if that's how you want to start out, by just approaching someone, you will give them the space to listen to what you're saying, to focus on you, to form an impression of you. Whereas if you come up with, hey, excuse me, I just saw you walking past and I just wanted to come and say hi because I thought you looked really nice. Anyway, where are you from? You come out with that, they have no space or time to make an impression. All they feel is shock, bemusement, and probably a flight response, right? They want to flee. So when you slow it down, everything else slows down and everything becomes a little bit more mellow and peaceful and easy. So the first step is to slow down your walking. If we go out, we generally think of it as like getting from A to B, right? I'm going out to go to the shop, to go to the supermarket, to go to a friend's house. But when you recognize the journey as the destination, to quote an overused cliche, but you recognize that you're actually not going anywhere, you're just going, and you're paying attention to your environment, you can afford to slow down because you realize that covering more ground isn't necessary, right? It's not a necessary part of this. So you slow down your walking, slow down your talking, slow down your speaking. Right, well, what next? That doesn't sound like a meditation sound, does it? That doesn't sound like a social meditation in the service of overcoming anxiety. So what's next? Well, start paying attention to your environment. right? That's what you do in meditation. You pay attention to reality. In many cases, you pay attention to your breath or your sight, your hearing, your sensation. You pay attention to your senses because they're real, because they exist, and they're not a story, and they're not the product of your imagination. They're actually there. And so meditation is very much about settling yourself into reality. So pay attention to your environments. Are there trees around you? Are there houses? What do they look like? Are there people, right? So you slow everything down. Slow down your walking, talking, speaking. 2, you pay attention to your environment. 3, you focus that attention that you're paying to your environment on the faces of other people, right? Communication doesn't start when you say your opening line. Communication starts the moment you make eye contact with someone. So the first doorway to communication is eye contact, and it says rather a lot, to be honest. So you're walking down the street and you seek to make eye contact with those around you. You see a family walking past and you look them in the eyes. You see a man walk past across the street and you pay attention to him. Maybe you will start to acknowledge how people are feeling by the expressions on their face. And what you'll find, this is something I do very often, is actually that you start to realize how lost in thought people are. And there's this sort of liberating feeling that comes with that, because you recognize that they are in the state that you are usually in, which is they're in their thoughts, they're lost, they're conscious of only the stories that are existing in their minds, of something that's either happened before or will happen in the future, and they are completely unaware, outside of seeing, but they're not really looking at anything, right? Their eyes might be darting around, but they're not taking anything in. They're not absorbing this moment. They're not absorbing their environment. And when you notice how many people are walking around in that state, you get a very liberating feeling, because you instantly recognize that the fact that you can see this in their faces means that you are no longer in that state. So this is the first sort of moment when you realize that you're coming out of a state of anxiety, because you're aware of how many people are in a relative state of anxiety, worrying about the past and the future. So you pay attention to the faces, and what you'll find is that wherever you are, even if you usually say, you know, Sam, it's all very well, but I never see pretty girls in my city. I never see attractive women in my environment. If that is truly the case and you live in a town, then you just need to travel to a city. It's as simple as that. Problem solve. Think laterally. Think about what you can do to solve the issue that you're facing. If you are in a city, which the majority of you are going to be when you are thinking about improving your social skills and meeting people, then pay attention to the faces of people and you will see attractive women. And you will also recognize on their faces how they are feeling right now. And when you recognize that the person that you've seen that you're attracted to is also feeling relaxed and happy, right? You no longer have anxiety, the fear of the unknown, that when you go up and talk to her, she is going to respond harshly, or she is going to blow you out or to reject you. You no longer have that anxiety, right? Because your attention to the moment, to the reality, has overcome the story that she might respond badly. A lot of what we fear is based on our prehistoric evolutionary history, is abandonment from the tribe. If we go up to a woman who's in our tribe of 100 to 150 people and she rejects us, or she has a strong dominant partner in our tribe, then we're fucked, aren't we? What do we do next, right? Every other girl's going to know that we got rejected by this girl, and we could be celibate. We might not be able to reproduce because we have this tribe. But now we're in cities of millions and millions of people. Our evolutionary hardware is no longer necessary and is no longer helpful. Pay attention to the reality. This girl looks relaxed, actually. She doesn't look mean or scary, and I can see that. And I'm paying attention, and I'm moving slowly, and therefore my thoughts are coming more slowly. Therefore, when I speak to her, I'm going to speak more slowly, and I'm going to be paying attention to her. And in these cases, you rarely get a bad response. A woman, when you come up to her with presence and eye contact, and you're paying attention to her, and you're confident that she's not going to respond badly because you've seen the way that she's looking at the world around her, and it's told you what you need to know. Our brains are finely tuned calculators, and they calculate minute changes in facial expressions, and that's what we call intuition. But really what it is it's our calculation of how a person is feeling and how they might respond based on what we've evolved to pay attention to, as it's important to our survival and to our social connections. So you go and talk to this girl. At the start, I would recommend having zero focus on outcome. You are simply paying attention to your environment, and like a child who first steps foot in a playground, you are excited and curious to explore your social environment. You don't go on the swings and the roundabout and the slides. Instead, you get to explore and investigate the people around you. You get to have your social adventure instead of your playground adventure. So I call this the social playground mindset, looking at the world around you as a social playground. Every time you leave the house is no longer getting from one place to another. The actual experience of being outside provides you with opportunities if you're willing to pay attention to them. So make life easy for yourself. That's the next step. First one is slow everything down. Number 2, pay attention to your environment. Number 3, refine that attention to focus on the faces of people. And number 4, make your life easy. Make life easy for yourself. And what I mean by make life easy is you might see a woman in a group or with a family, and you think, God, like I feel present and I'm looking at it, but I do not want to go and approach that girl who's with her father or in that family. I do not want to do it because I just feel like, you know, the dad could respond in any way. That seems like a horrible thing to do, and I don't want to do it. Right? Do not beat yourself up if you feel like that. It's difficult, right? You're going out, you're feeling some level of tension and anxiety. You see a girl with her father. No, don't expect yourself to see that situation and do it. Right? Take that pressure off yourself to do extraordinarily difficult things that feel extremely difficult right at the start. Again, the mountain mindset. The goal is the top of the mountain. The next step is what you pay attention to. Forget about the middle bit. Just take the easy next step. So what is the easy next step? Well, is there a girl flyering? Is there a girl in one of the shops? Is there a girl that is in an environment that it makes it easy for you to approach her? Working or doing something that gives you an easy excuse to talk to her. Maybe she's wearing a Green Day hoodie or something, and you could go up and say, hey, what's your favorite song by them, right? You could go and introduce it with some sort of visual cue, right, using a situational opening line. The most difficult approaches, in my experience, are ones where I can't, if I'm feeling some level of social pressure and social anxiety, which I do feel if I don't continue and with my consistency and keep going out and talking to people, is if I don't have any visual cue as an entrance point to the conversation, right? And I understand the opening line isn't important, but when you're feeling that anxiety, even for me, it can feel like, yeah, but that's fine, Sam. It doesn't matter what I say, but what the fuck am I going to say? Like, what am I going to say? Well, look for visual cues that make it easy, right? Whatever you can do to make it easy for you to talk to her, do that, and then take the first step. If it's a dude and he's wearing a cool jacket, go and tell the guy you like his jacket, have a conversation. Then the girl who's like sitting on a bench on her phone is going to be easier to come and sit next to and say hi to you. And then the beautiful girl that's walking past is going to be easier. And after 4 or 5, you hit your social flow. Generally speaking, it's like this. If you do 5 approaches and 2 of the approaches that you do are with a girl who has a high energy, is receptive to your approach, you will find yourself usually in a state of social flow. So 5 approaches, 2 of which go well or provide you with a real opportunity for connection and to discover something about her. That is usually sufficient for you to hit social flow. And when you do hit social flow, that is when this is going to become really easy, and you're going to be able to continue to meet and talk to girls in your environment without the same fear, without the same anxiety. So don't seek social flow, because it's like seeking presence of mind. As long as you're seeking it, that thing is going to evade you. As long as you're really seeking a girl and chasing and pursuing, she's going to evade you. But as soon as you accept the reality, you accept peace of mind, you accept whatever it is, then that thing becomes easy. So don't seek social flow, just take the next step, and social flow will come to you if you do at least 5 approaches, 2 of which are with someone who's very responsive. That's usually what it takes. So take that first step. That's the next point, is take that first step. Make life easy for yourself. Take the first step. So slow everything down. You're walking, you're talking, you're thinking. Pay attention to your environment, number 2. Refine that attention to the faces of people, number 3. Make life easy for yourself. Approach the easiest people you can to start off with. Don't pressure yourself to do very difficult things, number 4. And take the first step, whatever that step is, number 5. And then keep taking steps, and do not worry about anything other than you know where you want to go, you know what you're looking for, you have some sort of goal in mind, and now you are employing the system which, with enough dedication, enough time, and enough commitment, is going to get you to that goal. Cool. Let's get into some of these questions. Thank you guys for commenting. Thank you for showing up. I know where my true support lies, is in the people who turn up to my impromptu midday live streams. So I'm glad the quality is good. Let's see. This is part of the reason I find traveling so conducive to social interaction. I'm in no hustle to get from A to B. I'm simply there to be there and enjoy my surroundings. Yeah. There's a number of reasons why travel is so good for social skills. Yes, you're in a new environment, right? So you're seeing new things and you're enjoying and soaking up the environment. But more important than that, there is a tremendous amount of pressure and sometimes semi-conscious anxiety that comes when you travel, because you're in a new environment. You don't have your tribe there. You're away from what you know. You're away from what you're used to. And so you have to overcome that. You have to prepare yourself. You have to be aware. You have to be thinking about the cultural nuances and what is different about this place to where you're from. And that forcing you into a state of adrenaline or maybe moderate anxiety and excitement is what is going to give you the energy to actually find going out and approaching more easy. But more importantly, with traveling, it's also that you're resetting these anchors, right? When you wake up on the same place every day, you walk down the same streets, when everything is the same, when everything is consistent day in, day out, your mind narrows as there's less stimulus creating new ideas and new neural pathways in your mind. When you travel, you actively destroy those fixed ways of thinking and that small paradigm that you develop when your life is too consistent, and you force your brain to open up, to get creative, to think in new ways, to have new ideas. And this is also the birth of improvement in communication. It's destroying, creating progress, then destroying that progress and starting again. Right? It's like crutches in an interaction. You say something cool the first time, natural, gets a laugh, you keep saying it, becomes boring, you start disliking it, feels inauthentic. Crutches in an interaction, you should be aiming to destroy them, even if they work, because they are the death of creativity. They are putting these canned ideas and these canned lines in your interactions, which causes you to stop thinking for yourself and stop discovering and stop your active imagination from flourishing. I don't know who Kevin Samuels is. I don't really care about any group identity. I don't really care about the names, not the people. Of course I care about the people, but I don't care for the names. Men Go Their Own Way, Red Pill, feminist, alt-right. None of this means anything to me. It's just a group of individuals who have vaguely similar points of view, and then they feel a sense of community, virtual community in online networks. I don't really think it's good for anyone. I think it drives us towards the extremes. I think where usual everyday colloquial terminology exists, we should not be using tribal terminology. And I think the red pill community, although the original ideas are quite interesting, right, and true, like, let's look at the reality of this, what's actually going on, what's the actual way that human dynamics works, and let's accept that and work with it. I think the identity with this tribe drives people to the extremes. Are you going to be releasing any more student infield in the future? I found those really educational. Yeah, I got this question yesterday as well. I think I will. As long as I can find a way around having a cameraman lurking in the background and filming people without their knowledge. If I can find a way around that, which I think I might be able to do with the DJI, the vlog style, of just having a camera on you, talking to the camera and then talking to another person and then talking to a group of girls with a student, I think it could work, but it's yet to be seen. Infields are illegal in Brazil. It's illegal to film someone without their knowledge. And in England, honestly, it probably should be. I don't think it's particularly harmful to anyone, but I also don't see why you should be allowed to do it, especially if their identity is visible. Is it good to go out with wingman you don't know to force you to approach? I don't necessarily believe that not knowing your wingman is going to force you to approach, but I think it's good to go out with people who are less experienced than you are. And if you're very inexperienced, but at least if you know something about it, something very interesting happens when you go out with someone who looks up to you as a source of knowledge. And that could be someone who's only minorly less experienced than you are. But what happens is you assume the role of the person that is leading and that is in charge. And they assume the role of the student, the person learning. And both roles are valuable, but particularly for guys who are trying to get more confident and more experienced. By going out with someone who is kind, easygoing, and less experienced than you, what you will find is that it's actually easier for you to approach, because you feel like even if you fuck it up, this person's going to be impressed that you did it, right? Even if you don't approach, but you say some cool stuff, they're going to be impressed. So sort of temporarily pushing yourself into the role of authority can actually be beneficial when it comes to taking action. The problem is relying on that as a crutch, and that's the way many of the sort of online gurus and coaches go, is they get so much praise for doing what they're doing that they start to just believe the stories and they forget about approaching, and they put too much pressure on themselves. And many people have wig outs and psychological breakdowns because they start believing the hype about themselves. So you want to put yourself in the role of the authority and in the role of the student, and appreciate the parts of your mind that are unlocked through both roles, but never fully identify yourself with either. Just dip in and out of those roles. Is it strange that I find being in an unfamiliar environment more liberating? For some reason, it can be more difficult to be approaching in your own locale. Yeah, it's much easier in an unfamiliar environment because you have the subconscious understanding that there are no repercussions, right? If you live in an area and you know people around that area and you see it every day, there is a natural anxiety to mess it up because you don't want to, excuse the vulgarity, to shit where you eat. You don't want to make a mess where you live. And so in an unfamiliar environment, it's much easier because you don't have the same pressure to do well. And as we talked about, you've broken yourself out of a lot of those paradigms of thinking, the identities, because I walk down the street every day, I think this way every day. Because I wake up in the same bed every day and I've spent so much time in anxiety there, whenever I wake up in that bed, I feel anxious. When you move to a new place, you are able to break out of your original identity and to think for yourself again and to redefine your identity, right? To redefine the way your personality is, which is, as we've already talked about, never in a fixed state, but sometimes you need that experience of feeling different and continuing to feel different and to think differently in order to realize that your identity is no fixed entity and your personality is no fixed entity. Yep. Awesome content, thanks. Hey Sam, how long do you think it takes a consistent beginner to get results? I don't know really what a consistent beginner is, man. Like, it's always seemed occasionally useful, but again, I wouldn't identify yourself as a beginner. There are occasions where it's useful to use this terminology, right? When it's in the right context. I wouldn't be saying that you're a beginner. I would just be saying that you are what you are. You're a human man who's going out and feeling some things, and you want to talk to other people, and some of those people are going to respond well, and some of them are going to respond badly, and you are merely curious to learn about them and to see what happens when you open this Pandora's box, when you open that doorway into the life of another person. If you have that mindset, you no longer need to define yourself as a beginner or intermediate. Now, to answer the question more directly, I think if you go out for, like, let's say 2 months and you're consistently approaching in the daytime, doing maybe 10 or 20 new approaches per week over the course of 8 weeks, I mean, what I would define as a beginner is someone who's never had the sense that approaching can be almost mindless, and it can be a habit, and it can be consistent. I would define a beginner as someone who still has to overcome this deep sense of fear and terror to approach one person. I think if we're going to put a name to it, then an intermediate would be someone who's at least experienced some sort of consistency, some sort of positive feedback that's informing the way forward, whereas a beginner is like still in that 0 to 1%. But I wouldn't spend too much time defining yourself as a beginner or whatever. I would just be looking to open the doorway into the life of another person. We just thought the same thing, man. And you used slightly less vulgar terminology, so good stuff. Identity can stiffen a person. Fluidity is being alive. Yeah, I think identity does stiffen a person, and it makes people less intelligent in the complex sense of intelligence, in the open-minded sense, which means that you are no longer so invested in the truth of your ideas, right? Someone with a very strong identity who identifies strongly in one way, they have less ability to modify and correct for errors in their thinking process. And that is problematic. And that's why that beginner's mindset, or in Buddhist lineage, it's called the Buddha mind, is that total open-mindedness, that even when you are technically very experienced with something, you treat yourself as a total beginner and you're completely open to totally throwing out everything you know and forming new ideas. And lack of identity allows people to keep renovating and changing and modifying and learning and growing their ideas, learning new ideas and growing their original ideas. Whereas a fixed identity, in a sense that you are identified, it is an illusion in itself, but the sense that you have this fixed identity or that you are part of this group stops you from being able to modify your opinions, to listen to others, and to inform you in a better way. And as I always say, we see this both on the extremes of pro-masculinity causes, for lack of a better term, and on the other side in the hyper-radical feminism. Neither of them are right, and you can intuitively sense that when you start getting outraged by the actions of someone else and wanting to shoot them down. This is just not a helpful mindset to have. And that's what I see more and more when people define themselves as a right wing or a left wing or MGTOW or a feminist or whatever. I think we should be just individuals with our own thoughts and our own beliefs, and we should be open to changing them when better ideas come along. Space like time engenders forgetfulness. Remember, right? For me, two things are important for a wingman. Good energy, especially from blowouts. Two, they must try to approach and not just watch you, more common than you think. Otherwise, they sap your energy. Yeah, okay. I think that's true. For me, I would say that the primary two things, qualities in a wingman, is the first one is a genuine desire that you also do well. And the opposite of this is horrible. When you go out with someone who is quietly trying to pull you down or enjoying your failure or wanting to feel like they're doing better than you in some sort of original sense of the word better, some sort of elemental sense of better, not just had a better day. You're allowed to have this sort of like fun competitivity, like a gentle competitivity can be motivating, but when someone genuinely desires that they are better than you and that you do badly, this is a real problem. And the opposite of that is someone that desires for you to do well, that starts to pay attention to what sort of things help you, what sort of advice and comments motivate you and make you feel good, and then they even sometimes subconsciously towards doing those things and saying those words. So the first thing is an enthusiasm for you to do well, and the second thing is curiosity for me, which is just someone who sees the adventure. And that's why I focus so much on this social playground theory of the world is your playground. But instead of the toys in the playground, you've got the social environment, you've got the people to explore. So those two mindsets for me. They must try to approach and not just watch you. Yes and no, man. Like, I mean, obviously from my position, I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of guys, and a lot of them, you know, at the start, they just cannot approach. And so they're watching me. And I personally don't mind that too much. And I don't think it necessarily saps your energy. It can be that the other way saps your energy when they're approaching loads and you don't have the, you know, you don't feel on top of it and you feel kind of intimidated because it looks like they're doing really well. That can also sap energy. So I wouldn't accept number two, because I would say that it's actually not a fundamental quality, but it's certainly helpful if you're both going for it together. Broad question, but what are some tips to build self-confidence to not care what others think? Yeah, it's a really good question. But for me, the way I see self-confidence is, as I've said, it's a state that you move in and out of. And when you're doing what you know you should be doing, when you're getting up at the time that you said you would get up and doing the routine that you set for yourself and going out and doing that approach when you said you would, you shift into the gear of self-confidence. And confidence is everything is another cliche. But this is what people don't realize, right? You think that, oh, I'm feeling confident now, but I'm not a confident person, right? I did my meditation, I went to the gym, I'm eating healthy, I did some approaches, I'm feeling confident, but I'm still not getting girls, right? Because I'm not good looking, because I'm not this, because I'm not that. The truth is this, there's a lagging result. When you improve yourself and you set the fertile ground for good opportunities and for good results, there's a lag on those results coming. And what I mean by that is that the results don't come as soon as the soil is fertile. The flowers don't grow as soon as the soil is fertile. And the results don't come as soon as you shift into confidence. But the longer you spend in confidence, the more ground you're going to set for those opportunities to arise. So that's why I try not to think about it as becoming confident, but instead moving into a more permanent state of confidence, right? Moving more often into confidence. And in the same way with meditation, never seek to be enlightened. I want to be always present-minded. You say, I want to spend more of my waking hours in a state of present-mindedness. And so that's how I would think about, instead of building self-confidence like it's something that you build inside of you, say that there is this state of self-confidence and I can shift into that state, right? If I take action that pushes me there. And when you take that action, the longer time you spend in self-confidence, the more self-confidence becomes the way that you appear to be, because you're in a state of self-confidence. And then when women notice that you are in a state of self-confidence when you meet them, and then when you're messaging them, you're still in a state of self-confidence, then they start to believe that you're a partner that's worth investing in because you're spending much of your time in a state of self-confidence, right? And we attribute self-confidence as if it's like a fundamental quality of a person. He is self-confident, he is not self-confident. But really, it's just the amount of time we spend in these states. And some people spend literally no time in self-confidence because they are completely addicted to their negative opinions of themselves. And they recite them over and over and over again until there's no room for anything else, because they have one pleasant moment and then it's back to self-hatred. It's back to the negative self-talk. So what you must do is do what is required of you to do. Foremost, approaching women if you're here. It's difficult. It's really difficult. Difficult meaning that there is a greater barrier to doing it than most people can overcome, right? The motivation to do so is less great than the barriers towards doing so. So that's why it's difficult, because people want to do it and they can't. If you do that, you go out and you follow the process that I gave you at the start of this video. If you've just joined, then I would go back to it, because I give you the 5 steps for how to overcome social confidence in a very, very easy binary step-by-step way. And so if you take the right action, you will shift yourself into the state of confidence. And the longer you spend there, the more opportunities will come your way, because the opportunities only have the chance to flourish when you are in that state of self-confidence. So the longer you spend there, the more opportunities will come and the more fertile the ground they will have in which to flourish. How to deal with competition. Competition in what sense? I'm anti-competitive by nature. So I'm anti-conflict and I'm anti-competitive. The former I have worked on a lot. I have put myself in positions where I have to induce conflict, or at least that awkward situation, some sort of tension between me and another person, not in a mean way, but just when it's required, right? Because I said to myself a long time ago, when I about 2021, I started to understand loyalty as a concept, and I started to say, I want to be the person that if I'm in a group of people and one of them is talking bad about one of my friends, I know that I want to be the person that stands up for that person who isn't there, right? I know that that is fundamentally a quality as a person that for me is utterly essential to have, whether man or woman. If a woman has that quality, she should stand up for her friends. When a group of girls are talking bad about someone and the girl would tell them, like, why are you talking about her behind your back when you're nice to her face? That is a rare and important girl, and it's much rarer between men than we care to admit. And I don't mean giving someone a bit of banter, right? If you're with a few friends and someone's taking the piss out of one of them and he's not there, that's banter, that's normal. But if someone is saying pointed or comments that are nasty that they wouldn't say to that person's face, and you do not speak up, you stay quiet, then for me, that's a quality that you should want to encourage, and that requires an ability to deal with conflict. With competition, I'm anti-competitive, and so I don't care, right? If people are getting competitive around me about a girl, I would just let them do their thing, right? If they see a girl and, you know, they want to go and talk to her, and maybe I wanted to go talk to her first, I'll say, go for it, man, go on, right? Because I think it's more important to have the understanding of abundance and to have the mindset that you know there's going to be more opportunities, and that this person, whatever happens here, if they're constantly competing against other people and not really focusing on you know what they actually want for themselves, they're just trying to do better in some vague sense than other people, I don't think it's helpful. So I think competitiveness is helpful in some senses, but I think hyper-competitive people, there's definitely a downside to the competitive coin. Yes, it's a high character trait that's very high in a lot of the most wealthy people in the world, but what you don't see is the other side of that, which is how it causes them to suffer in other areas of their life. So I think there are very often these shadow sides to what we see as positive personality traits. We don't often pay attention to what are the hidden downsides of that quality. And for me, I don't value competition highly. It's not something that I think is important in my life. I would rather be telling people, you go for it then, man. If you like her as well, you go for it. Because in the long term, those people are going to want to have you around, and people are going to find that quality attractive, that you don't need anything, right? You don't require anything to be okay. Has it got darker on the screen? That's a bit better. So, next one. Best way to kill outcome dependence. keep taking the next step. If you feel dependent on the outcome of this, I mean, look, the outcome dependence, it's a very broad topic. It's a very broad word, isn't it? It's like, look, the outcome may matter a little bit, because if you really like the girl and she seems really cool, you have a really good impression, you have a really good connection, then to some extent, if you just like walked away and never saw her again, you would have had an outcome that's suboptimal, because it would be better if, you know, you had a chance to meet again, right? If you got her number wrong on your phone, that might be a good time for you to say, damn it, I'm not going to make that mistake again. I'm going to learn from that mistake because I want a different outcome. So I don't think it's so important to necessarily kill all outcome dependence. I just think it's more important to understand, in the grand scheme of things, if you are doing enough of this, each individual outcome would be less crucial by itself, right? If you had more and more opportunities when you have a long-term thinking mindset on this, then each individual outcome is less important. But I don't think it needs to be unimportant or non-important. Thanks, Ultrasound. Glad you're enjoying it. I'm enjoying doing these random streams as well. A bit underrated. Definitely would like to see you on PWF. What's PWF, man? What is PWF? I think, I don't think my channel is underrated. I think actually it's doing surprisingly well, considering how inconsistent I can be with releasing content. So I'm looking to change that. But I'm actually very grateful for the people that have stuck around, even when I've gone a couple of weeks where I'm traveling or doing something else and I haven't been able to post, because I think consistency is always the most important thing with growth. So yeah. Sam, I feel you should write a book on mixing this incredible social experience you have achieved with your middle path stoic way of looking at life. A lot of guys would really grow from that. Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm actually in the process of writing a book. It's not so focused on stoicism as mindfulness, because I think mindfulness is underneath stoicism. I think it's more elemental. Stoicism is a man-made philosophy that very, very well embodies a lot of the concepts of mindfulness. And it gives a very easy and direct access route to mindfulness and focusing on reality and truth. However, I want to focus more on mindfulness and stay more out of the philosophy. The philosophy of Stoicism is very important, I think, for most people, because it provides a gateway into some of the fundamentals of how to live. But I would rather focus on the fundamentals than the gateway. But yeah, I appreciate that, and it's happening. Yo, MJ, how's it going, big man? I'm coming back to London on June the 23rd, guys, so I'll be there. This is Mr. Mark Joseph, who is a colleague of mine and one of the most exceptional teachers for guys who have social anxiety that I've ever met. So big up, Mark Joseph, and I'll see you in late June, brother. Wingman is only useful if you're in a big set or you get blocked by her friends, although that shouldn't be an obstacle if you know how to handle the sets. No, I wouldn't say it's only useful there. I would say that it's helpful to have people that you like. Did you guys see all that? Something just completely eluded me and left me. I don't know if that was still recording, but I just lost this stream. So you guys are still here, which is good. Yeah, so we were talking about wingmen. I think it's helpful to have your tribe around you, so people that you know and people that you like. It's always helpful to have them around you, whatever the situation, right? So I don't think it's only useful in a large group. I think it's useful to have people who you consider as part of your tribe, or someone that you're close to, someone that helps you, someone that you can help. They are good people to have around generally. No, I actually was more Seneca coming up. I couldn't really get into Marcus Aurelius. I feel like he's still a little bit He's a little bit ahead of me. I think that's one for the next 10, 20 years, maybe. They're talking about a third wave of the pandemic. I love that word so much. I don't ever know if it's tongue in cheek or serious, but I find that word very funny. Who knows, man? I mean, I'm coming back from Brazil, so maybe I'll bring back a nasty third wave with me. Who knows? I recommend an over-the-counter drug called Phenibut. You can buy it in Russia and FSU countries like Ukraine. It kills your social anxiety. Wayne, look, you get no free meals in this life. A lot of things seem like it's just free, right? Take MDMA and you fall in love with everyone and you learn social skills and you increase in social openness, but you pay for it the next day, and you pay for it in the neurotoxicity that extreme doses of MDMA can have on your ability to feel happy. Essentially, there are no free meals. You can take Valium or Xanax and it feels amazing. Maybe one time you can do it and have no effects, but if you do it over a course of days, it's going to have an effect. I don't believe there are any free meals, and I don't believe we should be trying to cut corners. Maybe it's an occasional thing to try, but I think you've got to go the full route. Mindset is key. You've got to self-improve before you become consistently good at women. Yep. Serious wisdom being shared. Going to rewatch that self-confidence bit. Thanks for answering, Sam. You're welcome, brother. Competition. Some have more money. Some are smarter. Some are stronger. They will roll over you. No, they won't roll over you. You don't look. This is, for me, this idea of being heavily invested in competition is forgetting that you're going to die. Right? I said a quote the other day, which is that we're heading nowhere in this life. We're heading nowhere beyond the propagation of our own, genes, and that doesn't mean we can't enjoy the ride. If you are competitive, you're thinking this guy's got more money, he's gonna get better girls. This guy's smarter and stronger, he's gonna get better girls than me. This guy, and I'm here on the scale and he's here. You've forgotten that you're all heading to the grave, right? And you're in this speck-sized journey. You are alive for this tiny period of time where you get to enjoy this weird existence floating around on a rock that more often than not feels normal, but is completely ridiculous and bizarre. And when you're stuck in this competition mindset with other tiny human beings, you've just forgotten that you're going to die, and you need to focus on the reality whilst you still have it, because it makes no sense to worry about that. Just talk to the girls you want to talk to, and when you get on with them, you get on with them. When you don't, you don't. It doesn't matter either way. Keep going, keep talking, keep improving. If you want to buy some cool stuff, then make more money. If you want to give your child a good education, then try and make more money. But ultimately, we take everything a bit too seriously, and competition is a very good example of that for me. Are you into any sports? Yeah, I like, occasionally I like football, but I'm not really into it at the moment because I find it all a bit sinister and depressing during a pandemic with empty stands and European Super Leagues and all this nonsense. Surfing, I like doing and watching. I don't really like team sports so much. I prefer individual sports. Sure. Where are we? I forced myself to cold approach for a week and currently on day 8. So far, so good. I'm feeling like an alpha, but that's because I've been training mindset boxing and sounds wisdom. Awesome, man. Congratulations. Keep it up. Keep it up until it becomes habit. And when it does, things are going to get good. You're laying the foundation now. Can you extrapolate on mindfulness and how it has helped you? It's kind of tough to extrapolate on it, but I think what mindfulness does is, amongst other things, one of the most immediate benefits that anyone can have from paying attention to something that is real, the most commonly the breath, right? When you focus on the breath at the expense of everything else, you hear a thought comes into your head and you return your focus to the breath. What you find over time is that it's easier and easier to do that. And you start to recognize that these thoughts are just popping up, and then it's easier to get out of them. And after some minutes or some time, that just stops in some senses, and all you're focused on is what's going on around you, the sights, the smells, the feelings, the breath. And when you can learn to carry that feeling throughout the day, again, thinking about this mindfulness as a state that you move in and out of and not as part of yourself, right? But as a state that you can spend more or less time in, right? When you see a sunset, when you go somewhere beautiful and you have an amazing view, or you see an amazing sunset, or you're in an amazing location, or you have a moment where you recognize how lucky you are, or how beautiful this situation is, that is like a moment of mindfulness where you just truly recognize the reality, right? An amazing sunset, a starry sky. But then we lose that moment to a thought, like, oh, I need to get back home. Oh, I'm getting cold. Oh, I'm hungry. Oh, what am I going to do next, right? If you can recognize that thought that's just invaded your moment of mindfulness and just recognize it, then you are instantly returned, again, temporarily to that state of mindfulness. And the more often you can return to that state when thoughts invade, the more peaceful you are. And I don't believe in pursuing happiness. I actually don't think about happiness when I'm planning my life or thinking about what's important to me. Happiness isn't important, but peace is important. Like peace of mind, right? To feel peaceful makes more sense to me than to feel happy. Happiness, I don't even have positive connotations of that word. It feels like a temporary illusion. But peace feels more fundamental and more elementary. And so in mindfulness, you have space, right? So what we were talking about earlier with the social meditation, when you're walking around, if you're consciously walking slowly and you're mindful of what's around you, you're looking at the buildings, you're literally seeing what's around you and not thinking, you're just seeing what's around you, then you can pay attention to the faces of other people, right? And if, for example, if I'm with a client, I'm really listening to what he's saying and not just thinking about what, he makes a point and then I'm hanging on to my response to that point until he stops talking. No, you let that point go and you keep listening. And what happens is that a better point will come across, right? Or something important that you would have interrupted or you wouldn't have listened to will come out, and you'll find actually that everything is more effective. And with that social meditation, it is literally the absence of anxiety when you can look at a girl and instead of thinking, oh yeah, but she's got a boyfriend, she's not going to want to talk to me, it's weird, there's too many people watching, I'm not good enough, I'm not feeling right, I want to buy a new shirt. Instead, you read her facial expression, you say, oh damn, she looks peaceful, she looks fine, she looks happy, she looks calm. I know she's not going to respond badly. And you walk up and you say, hey, how are you doing? She's like, oh, hey, good, how are you? And you can have this moment where you're like, oh my God, all this time I've been making up these stories about how someone's going to respond. And all I needed to do was actually just pay a bit of attention to their face and I would have realized how they're going to respond. So yeah, I mean, that's how mindfulness in this context affects, but it's like that in all other contexts, right? As well, we can go into that in another stream. I want to keep it kind of social in this one. Lana, there you go. Yeah, camera out, cut out. Thanks for sticking with me through the fluid social blackout. Yeah, Joe, good to have you again, man. I covered some of this in the social meditation stuff at the start. So if you got a bit late, maybe go back and watch like the first 20 minutes where I covered the steps to overcoming social anxiety, because a lot of that is very much more detailed about how mindfulness, how you can use mindfulness to literally step-by-step overcome social anxiety. MDMA might be useful to long-term marriage success. Maybe, man. MDMA helped me in one experience where I was very anxious at university. Like, not very anxious, but I think for the first year, I went through a breakup with a girlfriend, and I had a lot of social anxiety. I was comparing myself to a lot of other people, and I was seeing people on a scale of like cool people and not cool people, and good people and not good people, and I had some very negative mindsets about that, and I wasn't confident, or I wouldn't consider myself a very effective person for the first year. I probably got stupider in my first year at university. And one time I took MDMA, and I felt for the first time ever, the first time I took it, that there was no one that was outside of my abilities to talk to. And so I saw like a girl that I was always intimidated by. I'm not really attracted to her. She was beautiful, but I thought she was sort of mean and too cool, and she was thought of as mean and very cool and all of this. And I just saw through it all, and I went up and talked to her and said, so it's obvious you have a very hard exterior, but I can tell that you're actually quite an insecure person beneath it, right? And I said it in such a way that she didn't get angry. She was just opened up because it was said with sincerity, complete sincerity, right? With complete well-meaningness and honesty. And there were a number of experiences where I just realized that it was possible to do things that I never imagined would be possible. And then I suffered the next day. But for me, those experiences were lessons in themselves. So even though there's a great cost in that you're going to feel like horrible the next day, the first few times I tried it, you basically go to hell the next day, go to heaven and then you go to hell. It was worth it for the lasting experience, the lasting lessons that I learned from it, and the sort of portals into another way of thinking that it provided. So I think there is definitely some utility to it. Red ocean and blue ocean, why competition do you only need a thing? Yep. At what age you started to be aware of the game and how did you get into it? Found out about, I did start with that. I found out about it when I was about 14. A friend of mine told me his brother was reading it, and it's sounded like magic, but I never really thought about it again until my first year at university, where I was just completely lost. Like I had no way of getting into. Like I just didn't feel like I was worthy of any women after my breakup. I was just sort of lost on a limb. I didn't know how to talk to girls, and then I got really into the game. In a bad way, right? I went too far into it, and started identifying with all of the language, and started doing the cube on people in the clubs, unsuspecting victims. And then over like a couple of years, you sort of level out and you realize where you're being too extreme and where your insecurities are causing you to think that you want things that you don't in fact want. And so over the following 5-6 years, I was transitioned back into the realm of normal human life and thinking clearly and not at the extremes of society and not isolating myself from friends who weren't also into it, but instead just relaxing, right? Not taking everything so seriously. Sam, have you ever read the Tao Te Ching? Yeah, I have read it, man. It's really cool. I love that book. I love it. It's like poetry where there's wisdom in like hardly any words. You can read them and they don't really mean anything, like literally, but you kind of understand you understand the message through just reading the words. It's very interesting book. Like there's something weird about that book. I loved it. I feel like you listen to too much of Joe Rogan about MDMA. I don't know, actually. I haven't actually heard Joe Rogan talk about MDMA much. He talks all about mushrooms and acid. MDMA was just, it was kind of obvious to me, like what the effects of that were. And I think that most things that survive in society have some sort of function, right? Sam Harris is a good person to listen to about MDMA though. So, yeah. Never read the game. Would you consider it mandatory reading? No, I wouldn't. I think that it probably is a good gateway. If I don't know if it is really, I wouldn't read it. I think it has a sort of brainwashing capacity where you start to feel very much like you need to identify with all this stuff. I mean, there's a brief bit at the end of that book where he basically says, and then I found a girl and like I never needed any of this book and she was immune to it and all of this. But the point's been made, right? Like if you read that book and you don't know much about this stuff, you will learn some interesting evolutionary psychology points and some there's some good advice in there as far as human behavior works. But it's very easy to start thinking in those terms, and it's not an attractive type of man that gets absorbed into the game side of this. It's much, much more attractive to think about this holistically and as just another part of your life that you're building towards, right? Your social life, your wealth, your health, and your love. And this is the love side. And so you want to invest around 30% of your time in your love and social life. And if you are insufficient in that area, then you need to take certain steps towards improving that area. And if you're insufficient in the other areas, you need to take steps in those as well. But underpinning all of those areas, I think mindfulness is is one of the key precepts. I found this both through Rollo Tomassi and his work just made too much sense to look at intersex relations any other way. Yeah, his information is accurate and it's presented in a very accessible and digestible way. However, I also think when I read his book, it was driving me slightly into an anti mindset, like anti, oh, women are, you know, they're all the same like this. They all do this, they all do that. And even if some of that has some truth to it, I don't think the attitudes that accompany the understanding of the information are valuable. I think the attitudes can be destructive. And I think Rollo's a good writer, and I don't believe even necessarily that that was his intention. And I'd love to talk to him at some point. I think it'd be interesting. However, I think you've got to read with caution, because you can easily find yourself becoming a little bit too extreme if you don't pay attention and just take it at the informational level and not at the attitudinal level or the emotional level. Sure. It's odd how something so natural as human face-to-face contact is so alien to a lot of the world. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's genetic and there's a lot of stuff that's cultural, and I think this is something cultural where we've just got the bad end of the bargain in terms of culture. Because over here in Brazil, it's not weird at all, and in other countries, it's not so weird. So I think, I think you get some positives in culture and some negatives. Guys, I'm going to tie it up now. If you've just joined the live stream and you haven't watched the first 20 minutes, that's where I actually really address this overcoming social anxiety with a 5-step process. The first comment, if you're watching on YouTube, is my free calendar link. So book a free 30-minute call, and it's a breakthrough call. So I'm essentially just going to help you for 30 minutes with whatever it is that your sticking point is and try and get you to the next step. So I'm happy to talk to any of you for free. Just book there. And yeah, for anyone that hasn't watched, go back to the start. Thank you guys for coming. I'm going to do another one tomorrow at a mystery time, but it's going to be at some point between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. UK time. So be ready. Maybe I'll give you guys a warning for the next one, but I do like the randomness of all of this. So yeah, thanks guys for coming, and I'll talk to you soon.